What is a fife, also known as a writ of fieri facias? Basically, this is a document that a creditor is going to get after they obtain a judgment against you. And in most cases, they're going to record it in your local county. And then if you ever own real estate now or in the future, it will attach to your real estate and it will accrue interest. So if you've got a fife that is recorded against you and you've got nice, wonderful equity in your house, you better take care of that fife because it is accruing interest. Now, will it go dormant in Georgia? Yes, it can. But don't forget, it's very easy for a sharp creditor to renew it and renew it and renew it. At least a couple times a year, we'll get a call from somebody that says, this judgment was from 20 years ago. It's got to be stale by now. Well, it's not. Why? Because the creditor was smart and they kept renewing the judgment over and over and over. So let's go into some detail about what else can you do with a fife. Now, this rarely happens. Usually it's when you've got two people and they hate each other, a plaintiff and defendant hate each other, and there's a lot of drama. But you can take a fife and you can go to the local sheriff's office and you got to go through some procedures to get this executed. I don't do this. I'm not a collector. I represent consumers against creditors, but a creditor attorney can levy a fife, meaning basically this: they can show up to your house with a sheriff and they can say, I'll take this, I'll take this, and I'll take this. And they'll take whatever property they pick, up to the amount of what they think the debt is. And long story short, they can sell it off on the courthouse steps to try to recover money for the judgment. So way back in the olden days when people used to use real telephones, before the advent of cell phones, uh, anytime a creditor would go to a business and try to execute a fife, the first thing they took was the phones. And they did that to try to make it as painful as possible on the defendant so that they would work overtime to get the debt settled. And they usually did. When the phones disappeared out of an office, everything would shut down. Now phones are on computers and cell phones. I'm guessing that probably doesn't happen as much as it did back in the olden days. But people get pretty mean when they're showing up to execute a fife and take personal property. Now, let's go into some more detail here about fife. I know this term, it's odd, it's intimidating, it confuses a lot of people. And, like I said, when we say fife, we're talking about a writ of fieri facias. We're not talking about soccer. This has nothing to do with soccer. It's commonly used in Georgia to direct the sheriff or marshal to levy property to satisfy a money judgment. And the term also comes up a lot of times in tax situations where your local government will use a fife to put a lien for past due taxes. So it's basically a collection tool. It means somebody already has a judgment or some tax authority has issued an execution. And now the law gives that creditor a formal mechanism to try to collect it. That is the big picture. It's not just a random piece of paper. It's part of the machinery of enforcement. Georgia court rules even require fife be kept on the general execution document with information like the parties, the judgment date of the fife was issued, the date it was recorded, and the total amount. So let's suppose that a creditor wins a judgment and the debtor does nothing. The creditor is not finished just because the judge signed the judgment. The creditor still has to enforce it, and one way to do that is to get a fife. And that execution will be entered on the general execution document in Georgia. And this matters a great deal because it protects this creditor against good faith third parties in the future. So this is serious. This matters. Now let's get a little more practical. If there's a judgment against you, the FIFA will affect your property rights. It's part of the public record. It will cloud title to your house. It's got to be satisfied in order for you to sell your house if you've got one attached to you. Now, do you have to pay the full 100% amount of the debt? Not necessarily. You might be able to negotiate that, but you've got to get the other party to agree to market satisfied if you want to sell your house. So Georgia law says that the judgment, decree, or writ of fieri facias does not become a lien on title to real property until it's recorded in the Superior Court Clerk's office of the county where the real property is located and entered into the applicable indexes. All right. So a lot of people hear the word judgment and they think the creditor instantly has a lien everywhere. And that's generally not how it works in a clean, simple, automatic way. In Georgia, docketing and recording rules matter. Timing matters. So let's go into the core of a FIFA. It authorizes a levy. It's legal authority to go against property to satisfy a debt. If you go to different county websites, you can see a lot of details. A lot of counties like Fulton and DeKalb on their websites, they'll have descriptions of the steps that people need to go through in order to, if they did want to come to your house and start taking stuff, you've got to follow all the proper procedures. One of those is they have to have an insured storage unit to store the stuff in until it gets sold on the courthouse steps. And so that's why people almost never, go to the extreme of showing up to your house and start picking stuff up. They can, but they almost don't, because there's some pretty painful steps you got to go through to go that way. It's much easier to just get it recorded and hope that it attaches to some real estate, and then someday you're going to get a check when that property is up for sale and they go to closing. So it doesn't mean you automatically lose anything. It doesn't mean the sheriff is showing up tomorrow, that you've got to get legal notice. There are proper procedures people have to go through in the state of Georgia. It's not going to just happen overnight. But having said that, don't ignore it. Don't do that. All right. So another way of, you might think of in a tax perspective, FIFA might be related to the words tax execution, where the Georgia Department of Revenue says that a state tax lien is also called a state tax execution. It's a legal claim to secure debt. It will encumber real estate. Absolutely. It's part of the public record. And the Georgia Department of Revenue says a recorded state tax execution attaches to property owned by the taxpayer named in the lien. Now, when we're talking about IRS levies, man, those things are like super attaching, like down to the clothes on your back. So again, this stuff is serious. Don't bury your head in the sand like an ostrich. Talk to a lawyer. Get this taken care of. Okay, so is it a judgment? Do FIFAs come from lawsuits? Yes. Is it from a state tax execution? Maybe. All right, let's go through the rest of the points here. FIFA is not supposed to stay floating around forever once the debt has been paid. It's supposed to be marked satisfied, and that's really important. Make sure that happens. If you do pay the debt or negotiate it down, you want to make sure you get a copy that's recorded and says satisfied. Can you file bankruptcy if you have a FIFA recorded against you? And the answer is yes. And we would need to figure out, is this an avoidable lien? Does it impair your exemptions? Or do you have so much equity in your real estate that we're going to have to pay this judgment? Yes. And usually it's not technically truly satisfied until your Chapter 13 discharges. And so we would want to make sure that FIFA gets marked satisfied by the creditor. Same thing in a Chapter 7 situation if we're wiping debt out. All right, so if you do get served with a FIFA, don't panic, but don't bury your head in the sand. Let's tackle the problem one step at a time. We want to identify what is it, where's it from, is it legit, where's it recorded, what's the case number, and then we'll go from there. So this, again, this is an enforcement document. This is serious. It's tied to the collection from a judgment. Some people will say, well, I never went to court. Well, maybe they got a default judgment. Maybe that's true. Maybe you never did go to court. Maybe they served you on a property where you moved from and you didn't know about it. It's still legal. It's still legit. If you've got any questions about FIFAs and you're interested in filing Chapter 13 or Chapter 7, don't hesitate to give me a call. Thank you so much for tuning in.